Today we're talking about AOS systems. This is actually a finishing up of a project I was doing for our boat, for our AOS system, which is an air oil separator. And we finally got it finished, and before I installed it on the boat, I wanted to make a quick video on it, just in case anybody else out there has an older boat and they want to install one or make one or purchase one. This is a very good thing to do for your vessel. I made ours. I had to manufacture it because I couldn't afford the new one. The boat really needed one. It's an older boat. If you have an older boat, you probably could use an AOS system if you don't have one already. Now, the newer engines on anything that's newer than 20 years old probably has a system built in it. Most all your new diesels are equipped with some sort of recirculation system to clear the gases from your crankcase and recycle them through your intake and out your exhaust. Older vessels, however, do not do this. Now, all internal combustion engines, piston type engines, reciprocating engines, build up crankcase pressure and crankcase gases. This could be unburned fuel, exhaust, HCCO. They build up, they form a positive pressure in the crankcase, and they're usually vented through the valve cover of the engine or another area of the block, and vented. Ours was vented into the bilge, which was not very safe at all. Excuse me. Some of them are vented to the outside of the boat through a vent system. Ours was just a pipe hanging down. Now, this is something that cars and motorcycles and a lot of equipment years ago used to do. That used to vent it into the atmosphere. In the 40s, 50s, and up into the 60s, your automobiles, a lot of that was just vented into the atmosphere. And that's why, if you remember, if you're old enough to remember, the roads in the 60s and 70s always were really dark in the middle, and that's because a lot of oil, a lot of unburned gases, a lot of things would drip right onto the pavement because the old cars, they weren't really EPA compliant. Boats, cars, buses, everything's EPA. Motorcycles, EPA compliant now. Most all engines, well, except for the two-stroke engines do not recycle because their crankcase naturally is for the fuel. It's part of their intake system. So fuel is circulated through the crankcase and then back up into the combustion chamber for ignition. Now, four-cycle engines, piston-type four-cycle engines always go into the crankcase. Anything that bypasses the rings goes into the crankcase. There's oil, there's HC, CO, basically your exhaust. Some of this all gets past the rings. So there's always a positive pressure in the crankcase. When the piston comes down, positive pressure is produced and it's vented through the cap. Now, sometimes if the engine's really worn out, there could be, or it's running really poorly, there could be, if it's a gasoline engine, there could be a lot of gasoline, unburnt gasoline. Diesels can do the same thing if they're not burning efficiently. Fuel will go down into the crankcase, mix with the oil, and it will just evaporate, come right out the crankcase breather also. So it's not a healthy thing to have just like we had in our boat, just a pipe hanging into the bilge. If you're running for a lot of hours, that could be like having a small leak on your exhaust system. And the more worn out the engine is, the more that's going to produce fumes and carbon monoxide and all kinds of nasty things that you can't be breathing. It could become deadly in some situations if it's bad enough. So it has to be vented or recirculated. Now, an AOS system, this is one that I built. My company made it because we're saving on a micro budget, so I make a lot of things for the boat that I normally just can't afford. So this is the AOS here. I just took a aluminum tube, 1/4-inch wall thickness. It's about 2.5 inches in diameter. Machined out some plates for the gasket surfaces and have an intake, the output, and then a drain at the bottom in case I ever need to drain it. Now, what happens is that the pressure comes up, the unburnt fuel, well, actually it would be burnt fuels, exhaust, or anything that's coming past the rings, goes into the crankcase. Sometimes it's just basically air. On a real new engine, there's not a lot of bypass on the rings, but there's always going to be some. They're not 100% efficient. So what happens is all the crankcase gases come up through here, enter this chamber. I have a baffling system. I also have a cooling system to separate any of the gases from the liquid oil, because some oil droplets will come out, especially on a diesel. Ours gets a lot of little, droplets of oil coming up through the breather. So we go in. Basically, the baffle system baffles out the oil. The oil drips down to the bottom. This goes into the intake. So we're recycling any of the gases coming from the crankcase of the engine through here, back into the intake, and it's going out the exhaust into the atmosphere. And it's just recycling, burnt again, if you will. If your engine's if you have an old gasoline engine and it's running really poorly, this could make it run even worse. It can compound a problem because you'll be burning you're burning too much fuel, and fuel's getting past the rings, unburnt fuel, going into the crankcase. It would have to be, a really whipped engine, but it could really compound your problem. So you have to be careful when you do this, that your engine's tuned correctly, because if it's not, this could be more of a problem than what it's worth. Now, I have a drain in mind, so I could check it once in a while just to drain out any of the oil that builds up in here, but most of it drains right back as soon as the engine stops and there's no more positive pressure in the crankcase. This will drain right back into the engine because this is higher than the engine. I have it mounted, or I'm going to mount it in a position that's slightly higher than the crankcase, so it will bleed back. If you have one of these and you mount it lower than the engine, you're going to have a system to drain it, and you're going to have to check it and drain it off often. Now, they need maintenance just like anything else on a boat. It needs constant maintenance and watching over it, so if you build one of these yourself, put a drain on the bottom so you can manage how much oil is getting past your system and going into this, okay? So if your engine's really old and really worn out, you're going to get quite a bit. And it could be a few ounces, every month that you might have to drain out of here. It depends on how bad the engine is. Now, some engines, obviously, Wankels or rotary engines, turbines, 2 cycles, none of this applies to them. And this doesn't apply to boats that were built in the last 25 years. If you have a boat that's within 25 years old, you probably already have this system built in it. If not, you can build one. We have plans available. We post our address and contact information at the end of all of our videos. So if you really want plans for one of these, we could sell a set of plans for this. But it's something that you really want to look at if your engine's vented to the atmosphere inside your boat. That's really unhealthy, and you want to make sure you have some sort of recirculation system. You can go directly into the intake, but if you're not separating any of the oil particles, especially on a diesel, that's just going to go through and make the engine run a lot richer. You can get soot on the back of the boat. It could cause all kinds of problems, build up in the exhaust. If you have a wet muffler that's sitting way down and low in the bilge, and usually that's the case, not healthy. So I would build some sort of, if you don't have one, build some sort of, or purchase some sort of an AOS system. It's a good thing to have on the boat. We're going to mount this probably this week. I'll do a quick recap after it's mounted and its operation if anybody's interested. But that's basically the whole thing in a nutshell. So we're going to keep doing videos on some of the projects we're doing. Again, this is an old the boat sat 26 years on the hard, just abandoned, and we're saving it. So we got tons of projects. We're going to do little videos, clips on all the projects we're doing right now. I have 2 wood, the main hatchway going into the companionway, and our sail chute in front of the boat. Those are all being rebuilt because they were completely constructed out of wood, and after years of sitting out, the internal structure rotted. So we had some dry rot in there. We're going to get that out, remove it all, and rebuild the whole. I have half of one done already. As soon as I get that completed, I'll put all the clips together and edit it and get that out for you too if you're interested in that. If you have any ideas of anything you want to see on our show, please let us know, because again, we're doing all kinds of maintenance and basically redoing the whole boat. We're refitting it. We're doing a lot of it. It's almost a restoration project. Slowly, we're doing it, one piece at a time, and we're sailing the boat. So the boat's going to be in the water in 3 weeks. and we're going to be sailing it again. We're going to be doing videos on the water again. Last year we didn't get out too much. We did a few videos, but they were just slow, light air sails. So this year I hope to get a lot more sailing videos out there to you. And please subscribe, hit that subscribe button. We got a lot of good informative videos on this channel, and we're going to be doing a lot more for you. So thank you for watching Stardust and Golden channel, and stay tuned.